Okay, right. Welcome to the call-in meeting for the Scrutiny Board Environment, Housing and Communities. More on the detail behind that. But I would like to start today's meeting by saying a thank you to somebody who is leaving the council at the end of December. Karen Schofield, who is known to all of us, is leaving the council after 30 years of work with this council. I first got to know Karen in 1998 when I joined the council, when she was in a small room and I had to go and ask for rations from her for paper and various other things. And that was when I first got to know Karen, and she guided me through my first tentative steps in council. Over the years, I've got to know her. And for those present may be aware that one of her passions, she's a petrol head, and Mr. Schumacher is her hero. She's never quite had any British person as her hero, but Mr. Schumacher is her hero. But seriously, Karen, on behalf of everyone, can I thank you for your effort that you've given to the council over the years, and the patience that you have shown when some of us members get a little bit irate and a bit wanting things done yesterday, and you responded to it in the manner that we know you do. So on behalf of the council and everybody else, thank you very much for your time with us.
Thank you for those kind words. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, to get down to the more formal part of... Yes.
Could I just say something on behalf of the ward councillors of Kippix and Methley, because Karen's one of our constituents, so I'm sure we'll see you about.
You will, Councillor Harland. I'm sure you will.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No problem at all. No problem at all. Right. We now move to the more formal parts of the meeting. So what I would like to do first of all is ask each member of the board to introduce themselves. So I'm Councillor Barry Anderson. I chair this particular scrutiny board and I represent Adlin Wharfdale ward. Councillor Akhtar doesn't seem to be in. So Councillor Bentley.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. I'm Jonathan Bentley and I'm a councillor for Wheatwood ward. Councillor
Blackburn.
Good afternoon, I'm Councillor Anne Blackburn and I'm a councillor for Family and Wortley ward.
Councillor Brooks.
Hello, Councillor, excuse me, Councillor Kayleigh Brooks, Little London and Widows ward.
Councillor Collins.
Hello, Councillor Dawn Collins, Horsforth ward.
Councillor Dobson.
Good afternoon, everybody. Councillor Mark Dobson, Garforth and Swillington ward.
Councillor Gabriel.
Angela Gabriel, Councillor for Beeston and Holbeck ward. Good afternoon.
Councillor Graham.
Councillor Pauline Graham, Crossgates and Winmore ward. Afternoon.
And we have Councillor Gruen can't make it today, so his substitute for today is Councillor Denise Reagan. So Councillor Reagan.
Councillor Denise Reagan for Bermondsofts and Richmond Hill ward. Good afternoon.
Councillor Harland.
Good afternoon. Councillor Mary Harland, Kippix and Methley ward.
Councillor Khan.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Councillor Asgard Khan for Bermondsofts and Richmond Hill ward.
And we also have apologies from Councillor Sharp, and her substitute is Councillor Karen Renshaw. Councillor Renshaw.
Good afternoon, Councillor Karen Renshaw, representing House Robin Hood ward and substitutes. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Smith.
Good afternoon, everybody. Councillor Trish Smith, representing Pudgy ward.
Okay, now I'm now going to go on to the other people who will be playing the major part in terms of the debate that will go on. So first of all, Councillor Robert Finnegan, who is the leader of the MBIs and the person who's brought forward this call-in today.
Afternoon, everybody. I'm Robert Finnegan. I'm a Morley North councillor.
Okay. Councillor Deborah Cooper.
Afternoon, everybody. Councillor Deborah Cooper, Executive Board Member for Communities.
Mr. James Rogers.
Thank you, Chair. James Rogers, Director of Community Environment.
Mr. Shahid Mahmood.
Hi, Shahid Mahmood, Chief Officer Communities, Leeds City Council.
Michael Everett.
Good afternoon. I'm Michael Everett, Head of Finance, Supporting Communities and Environment Directorate.
Richard Jackson.
Good afternoon, Richard Jackson, Head of Facilities Management.
Sam Warbis.
Yeah, I'm Sam Warbis. I work in the communities team and oversee community centres across the city.
And Mark Turnbull.
Afternoon, Mark Turnbull here from Legal Services.
And Rebecca Atherton.
Rebecca Atherton, Principal Scrutiny Advisor.
Oh, good. Now, Rob's not here, so Angela Brogden.
Hi, Angela Brogden, Principal Scrutiny Advisor.
Right. So can I hand over now to look at items 1 to 6 to Becky Atherton, please.
Thank you, Chair. Number 1, there are no appeals. Number 2, there are no items requiring the exemption of the public. Number 3, there are no late items. Number 4, declarations of disclosable pecuniary interest. Can I now invite elected members to declare any disclosable pecuniary interests? I'll take silence as there being none. Number 5, apologies. Apologies have been received from Councillor Gruen and Councillor Sharp, and we have Councillor Reagan and Councillor Renshaw substituting. And then number 6, calling of a decision briefing paper. This paper outlines the call-in process and highlights the following key points in particular. This call-in meeting is specific to the report considered by the Executive Board on the 18th of November 2020. Issues outside of this decision, including other related decisions, may not be considered as part of the Board's decision regarding the outcome of the call-in. In conclusion, the Board may pursue one of 2 courses of action. Option 1, release the decision for implementation. Option 2, recommend that the decision be reconsidered. If for any reason the Board does not agree one of the above courses of action, then option 1 is adopted by default and the decision is released for implementation and may not be called in again. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, so I would now like to invite Councillor Robert Finnegan to outline the reasons why this call-in has been requested.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Can I also thank colleagues on this scrutiny board for taking the time to consider this request for Executive Board to reconsider the proposal to close Lewisham Community Centre in Morley. As colleagues are probably aware, there is no one who likes a good political row more than I do. When it comes to political bickering, then I'm at Premiership level, happy to bicker anytime, any place, anywhere. But this issue is too important to resort to a political slagging match. It will be easy to play the blame game and spend our time blaming each other. The community that is impacted by this proposed decision expects leadership from us all and demands we look towards a sustainable solution to this problem rather than a political slagging match. My representations this afternoon looks to do that, to identify a way forward that saves this valuable community asset, but also delivers to Leeds City Council some of the savings it needs to find in these difficult and challenging times. We all know that next year's budget is the most challenging we are ever likely to face. And that is saying something for those of us who have endured the budgeting process over the last decade. We all get the fact that we need to do more with less, that doing nothing is not an option. We all get that difficult decisions need to be made, but we also understand, regardless of where we stand on the political spectrum, that we need to do everything we can to protect the vulnerable. Bit of background to the community that relies on the Lewisham Community Centre. The community the centre serves is the most deprived community, not only in Morley, but across all 4 wards in the Outer South Area Committee, as in Robin Hood, Rothwell, Morley North and Morley South. There are neighbourhoods adjacent to the centre that have levels of deprivation similar to the most deprived communities in Leeds. Councillor Cooper, who represented the area and knows the community in the centre well, can confirm this. The centre is mainly used by the young, including dance groups for boys and girls, the youth service, and a disability group. A pensioner group focused on encouraging silver surfers wants to use it, as does a mom and tots play group. So the groups who use the centre most are the same groups who have suffered the most during the coronavirus pandemic: the young, the old, and the disabled. Its closure would batter these sections of our community most. And I think everyone will agree that they've already taken a hell of a battering up to date, perhaps too much of a battering. And what would closure achieve? The economic case is not so strong. The service review report, which proposes closure of the Lewisham Community Centre, states its running costs are £40,023 a year. This includes £22,716 for staffing costs. We believe this is inaccurate. Despite 2 attempts to clarify where the staffing costs come from, officers have been unable to do so. We believe this is a historical figure to cover the resident caretaker who hasn't been at Lewisham for over 5 years and as such can be disregarded. Indeed, using a key holder process can eliminate this caretaker cost even if it does exist, as it has done at Stanhope Community Centre in Cherwell and Driglington Community Centre. If staffing costs are removed, other running costs amount to around £17,000 a year. This includes gas and electricity, as you would expect, and a whopping £4,624 a year on water rates, more than gas and electricity combined. So unless someone is operating an Only Fools and Horses Delboy spring water scan from the centre, then it's clear that there are significant savings here with the use of a water meter and other water saving devices. The rates bill is over £4,000 a year, which, if it were taken over by a charitable community group, would be subject to relief possibly up to 90%. Income is around £4,000 a year. So the savings from closure, with the most optimistic assessment, is likely to be less than £13,000 a year. Such a small saving, which would have a significant community impact on the young, the old, the disabled, is not a decision I would be prepared to support, and I suspect other colleagues would agree with me about this. So what is the alternative? A community group, Lewisham Action Group, is being set up to explore the options to run the centre on behalf of the community. The group, which includes centre users, local residents, local town councillors, and other stakeholders, is to hold a meeting via Zoom in December to set up a properly constituted group to discuss with Leeds City Council an asset transfer or similar approach. I have faith in such a process. It worked well at both Cherwell, at Stanhope Hall, and in Driglington, where community groups took over the running of a building, successfully cutting costs and increasing use. I have faith in the community that lives around Lewisham Community Centre that they can do the same. What is the offer? We're asking the Scrutiny Board to recommend that Lewisham Community Centre is removed from the closure list for 12 months while we develop a sustainable and long-term solution to running the centre. Morley Town Council has indicated that it will support half of the running costs during this year, around £7,000. So the cost to Leeds City Council to remove Lewisham Community Centre for that year would be around £7,000. A small price to pay to explore the options of a sustainable future, as well as retaining an important community asset for the most deprived community in the Morley area. It gives a break to the young, the old and the disabled at a time when they all feel under significant degrees of pressure. It gives them hope. I hope colleagues will support this request and agree to recommend to Executive Board that the decision is altered to remove the Lewisham Community Centre from the proposed closure list for 12 months to explore sustainable alternatives. Thank you.
We've had a request to remove this from the list. Do we as a Scrutiny Board actually have that power if we were minded to do so, or are we limited into what we can actually look at legally today?
You can't attach any caveats to the decision to release for implementation. The only power the Scrutiny Board has today is to take one of the two options on the table, so either to release for implementation or to refer back to decision makers for reconsideration. The Scrutiny Board can informally make whatever recommendations as part of this discussion it may wish to, but in terms of the power to actually formally recommend the Exec Board does something that doesn't exist within the remit of this meeting.
That's fine. It's just so that members have got that as the background so that they can comment accordingly. So with that said, members, anybody would like to ask any questions of Councillor Finnegan to clarify any points that he's made? Councillor Harland.
Firstly, Chair, can I just clarify that this is out for consultation? No decision has been made about the disposal of this community centre?
Now, I'll call in Shahid just to confirm that. But yes, Shahid, can you just confirm that that is the case, please?
That is correct. The service review report recommendation said to approve the proposal going out to consultation as part of the council's medium-term financial strategy and preparation for setting the 21-22 budget.
Thank you. As with the one that's in my ward, I believe, Shahid.
That's correct, Councillor Harland.
Okay, just one to Councillor Finnegan. You said that there are two groups that want to use it. Why are they not using it at the moment?
At this particular, well, obviously no one's using it because of the situation that we're in at this particular point, but they find it difficult, as many of us do, to discuss with central bookings about its use, and they also find some of the costs prohibitive. I think if it's locally run, we can deal with a local booking process, which will work much more efficiently, and you'll have that direct sort of access. Plus, we can look at the charging policy at this particular point. Groups are put off because it costs too much to use the facility at this particular point. That's the feedback that we're getting from them at this stage. So part and parcel of a sort of community takeover is to address that, to address its underusage. I mean, we're not in any shape, way, or form denying the fact that it needs to be used better. But some of that resistance, we think, is central bookings, which are challenging often, and the fact that the costings policy don't really help those who perhaps need a bit of a help or a bit of support. And if I can just comment, if I may, on the actual recommendation. The recommendation, the service review report, which is in front of me, says members are requested to consider the proposal to implement the efficiency savings identified in this report, including the closure of Lewisham Community Centre, Morley South, Allison Bywater, etc. It doesn't actually say to go out to consultation. And if it did do, I'd be less worried. The report says to consider the proposal. It doesn't say to go out to consultation. We'd have been slightly more satisfied. But as colleagues will be aware, at the point where there is a proposal for closure, it's often very difficult to get the community to accept that that's not a done deal. And the best way of removing that cynicism that exists with them is just to remove it. Give it 12 months. Let's see what we can do with it.
Because that issue has been raised about the consultation, I'll now call on Mr. Rogers to clarify. Oh, James had indicated he was wanting to clarify.
Sorry, Chair, I'm struggling with my connection, which is one of the reasons why I'm not putting the video on. So if it's still working, just to say that Councillor Finnegan is right in part of what the recommendation says, but under that recommendation, there are a number of bullet points, one of which says also to approve the proposal going out to consultation as part of the Council's medium-term financial strategy and preparation for setting the 21-22 budget.
We'll be able to clarify and quiz the officers more clearly about that when we go over to their side of things. So, Councillor Bentley.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Robert, for your presentation. Just a bit more clarification. Can you just tell us how many groups are currently using I don't mean currently using, because no one's using it at the moment, but in either pre or post COVID, how many groups will be using this community centre? And sort of a bit of a follow up to that, as part of the plan, if as much as you know about it, and perhaps it's more of a question for officers, what plans are being made to accommodate those groups if the community centre were closed?
Thanks, Councillor Bentley. At this particular point, we have two separate dance groups using it regularly. We have the youth service who do 2 sessions out of Lewisham at this particular point, and we have a visually impaired group that use it at this stage. So we have 4 separate groups, if you like, disabled group, 2 children and young persons based groups, and the youth service. In terms of the alternatives, certainly officers are proposing Morley Town Hall. If anybody knows the location of the Lewisham Centre and the location of Morley Town Hall, they'll know that's a right hike up, and it's not in the heart of the community. And it's not necessarily the best of buildings if you would choose to dance, or if you are visually impaired as well. Those are the alternatives that we know actually exist. There isn't another community centre, formal community centre, Leeds City Council community centre in the Morley South area. This is the last one standing, if you like.
Now, so that Mr. Mahmood wanted to come in, I would like to try and get all the questions from the members first of all, so that we can then revisit things. So, Councillor Can and then Councillor Collins.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Finnegan, before bringing this for a call in, has there any conversation been taken with the officers and the executive member, just for clarification, please?
Well, at this particular point, we've had a long discussion at Community Committee. Now, as we understood the process, Community Committee are the ones who should be taking decisions on community centres, because the decision-making process is delegated down to Community Committee. So it's certainly been discussed at Community Committee at this particular point. I think there was a full and robust exchange at Community Committee at that stage. The Community Committee subgroup was somewhat uncomfortable with the fact that they weren't consulted by anybody about the proposals at that particular stage. So we're trying to work our way through the appropriate structures. Community Committee, then presumably to this particular body for a discussion, then presumably on from that to the executive member at that stage. That's my understanding of how the process should work. And as I understand it, Councillor Gettings, who chairs the subcommittee, is already speaking to officers about what we can do to provide a sustainable future for Lewisham Community Centre. So at this particular point, I think this has been in the public domain over the last 2 or 3 weeks. We're trying to work through the processes as we understand them in terms of the sort of structures that we're supposed to go through. So rather than sidestep Community Committee, try and run it through Community Committee, which it's doing at this stage. This is another opportunity for us to have this decision reconsidered.
Okay, right. I've got Councillor Collins, then Councillor Smith, then Councillor Renshaw. So Councillor Collins first, please.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Finnegan, if this proposal is that it should go to consultation, and that's what's been approved, what are you actually trying to achieve by calling it in? Is it just to highlight this so that the consultation has more response, or do you really feel that it's more appropriate not to have a consultation with the local community and to do it behind closed doors?
Right. My worry is that once things get on lists, it's very difficult to get them off those lists. And to go out to your community and say, yeah, this is on a proposed closure list at this stage, if you were trying to galvanise that community to come together to look at alternative ways of running it, it's very difficult to convince them to put that time, effort and energy in, because they think if it's on a closure list, the council's purely going through the formalities, and what's the point? So I think what I'm trying to say at this particular stage is, if we were to accept that this should be referred back for reconsideration, give us a year. If it fails, it's Finnegan's failure. Nobody can take responsibility other than myself at that particular point. It costs you £7,000 to actually do that, because the town council's putting in the other half, and it gives that community, which is pretty much a community that has little faith in central government, local government, all the rest of it, that they've got a genuine sporting chance of pulling this off. If it's on a list, or it's on a proposed closure list at this particular point, then to galvanise that community, get them involved in any sort of process is a lot more difficult when you're already on a list for closure. I think that would be it, and we want to make sure that we bring them in. There's a lot of well-motivated people in that community, I'm sure, wants to get involved. We'd look at localising it, we'd look at the charging policy, we'd look at what we can do to encourage more use of the centre amongst all sections of the community in that area. But I think it is a devil of a task to get them motivated and enthused about the proposal if it's on a closure list. I think it's a foregone conclusion, and that's a very difficult thing to pull off.
Councillor Collins?
Yeah, I just want to come back, Chair, again to Councillor Finnegan. Isn't there a risk now, though, that if you get this taken off the list, that same community will go, well, hey, we've won, it's still staying there? I can appreciate what you're saying about it should never have gone on the list in the first place, but I'm just concerned that psychologically it might actually be worse now to take it off the list, because people will think that there's no threat to that community venue. Can you not see that could be an issue?
Well, it would be, but what we're asking is it's taken off for 12 months. So the community at that particular point can see that the City Council is giving them an opportunity, us an opportunity, to come up with a sustainable solution. It's not an open check for it to go on forever and ever and ever. They know that the clock is ticking, but that clock is ticking in a fair way, in a way that is less pressured than, good Lord, if we don't pull this off, we're going to end up with a sheeted up building, or it dropped, or whatever it might actually be. So I think there is some mileage in saying to the community, okay, we, all of us, councillors, you, the town council, whoever, all partners, have got 12 months to come up with a better proposal than this. And I think that galvanises people. It gives them an opportunity to reflect on potential alternatives. So it's not an open check. We're not saying leave it open forever and ever and ever. That's just doing nothing is not an option. We accept that entirely and utterly. But just give us a bit of time where we can get that community galvanised, we can give them hope, and we can come back with a proposal. And if we fail, it's our failure. It's the community's failure. It's not the City Council's failure. They've bent over backwards to be reasonable and accommodating.
Okay, thank you. Right, I've got Councillor Smith, Councillor Renshaw, then Councillor Blackburn, then Councillor Bentley. So Councillor Smith is next.
Thank you, Chair. So Councillor Finnegan, I've got a couple of points that I've been listening to. So obviously, we think that it's going to go out to consultation to the community. So have you got plans in place to actually galvanise your community to make sure that their voices are heard? You know, have you got avenues in place to, and you're ready to go, knowing that that will happen? The funding for next year, you're still expecting the council to go 50-50 with you on the funding when you know that they're struggling. So I'm just wondering if there's any opportunity there to actually take it wholesale for the 12 months. Should that proposal sort of carry, at least that way, then the council know that they have no liability whilst you're buying yourself your time. I've got a question over future income streams. If you're already saying that, you know, the groups are limited in there, the income in the area is limited in there, you know, you're going to set up a group to take it on as an asset transfer and move it forward. So I think there's a lot of, you know, ifs, buts, whys and wheres there. And ultimately, if you know, it does go down the route that you buy yourself 12 months, the 12 months comes to the end, we're no further forward, you know, how does it end? I know you've said that, okay, it's Finnegan's failure, but ultimately, how does that end? How do you leave your community feeling? Sorry, there's a few points there.
No worries, let's see if I can work through that. If this committee we're so minded to refer it back to exec board to buy us another year and have it taken off the list at this particular point, I will pledge now that the town council will cover the 13 grand at this particular stage. So there's an offer. Not that I'm here to barter, but there we go. There's an offer on the table for this particular scrutiny to reflect upon. We'll cover that as an offer if it's taken off the closure list at this particular point. So it's there, it's in front of colleagues. They wish to go down that particular path. In terms of the income stream, at this point, we're getting about 4 grand in from the users, just over £4,224.47. The issue at this particular point is that people are put off. Why are they put off? Because central bookings doesn't work anywhere near as well as it should do, and it is almost impenetrable for you to be able to find out how to actually get the room booked, what it's going to cost you, all those other issues. So there's an issue there. At a point where you've got some local control, you sidestep central bookings, and that makes that process much easier. On top of that, we've got groups who are keen on looking to explore the options of actually using the centre, but they find the present charging policy is unaffordable. Now, if it's unaffordable at this particular point, they generally don't go anywhere because there isn't an alternative. You can't trail up to the town hall because the town hall is even more expensive and unaffordable at this particular stage. So the option would be for us to look at what we can do to increase usage. We think that that is a nail down. There are no other groups that we know want to use it. If we get a reasonable local based charging policy, then I think the income will increase at that particular stage. I'm absolutely sure my colleagues at the Town Council would look to be able to provide whatever help and support is necessary if there was a shortfall, as would my colleagues on Community Committee. So what we're basically saying is let us provide a localised approach at this particular point and give us an opportunity. Now, and if in a year's time, okay, the community doesn't come together, we don't come up with a plan, we don't find some sort of sustainable route out of that one, well, that will be a failure for everybody's point of view, because your options are you either sheet up the building, which is fine, my community loses, but it's going to cost you something to deal with the security, or you drop it, and God knows what the cost would be to actually drop it and cap off the gas and the electricity and the phenomenal water supply that we've got there at this particular point. If that's the case, then there's going to be a cost whatever way we actually look at it. Now, we have to figure out new ways of doing things. We're in the toughest financial bind we've ever found ourselves in at this particular point. The community has to accept that if it feels that these assets are valuable, it needs to be part and parcel of the role of resolving those particular challenges. The alternative to look and hope somebody's going to pick up the slack, whether that's the council or the town council or anybody like that, is unrealistic and unachievable. So 12 months, the offer's there on the table. Let's see what we can do with it. And if it fails at that particular point, it's a failure of everyone. But it would only be a failure if we believe that that community isn't likely to meet those challenges. And I personally think that if we give them hope, they will meet those challenges.
Do you want to come back, Councillor Smith?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah. So, Councillor Finnegan, if you'd been consulted at an earlier stage, do you feel that you'd have come up with these proposals with the potential to save all this angst and everything else?
Yes.
Okay, fine. That's clear. Right, Councillor Renshaw.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to add, I think Councillor Finnegan probably needs reminding that it was discussed at the Outer South Community Committee, and it was made clear in there that it was a consultation. And the reason why there was some confusion was because it had been the community centre subgroup meeting the same morning as it was the Outer South Community Committee. So maybe Councillor Finnegan just needs reminding that yes, it was made aware that it was a consultation exercise. On top of that, I'd just like to ask, is there a local community group that already supports that does fundraising events to contribute towards the outgoing costs of that centre?
No.
No. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Councillor Blackburn, then Councillor Bentley.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd like to know when you say that a group, are you hoping that a group will take it on as a community asset transfer? Would this have been done if it hadn't have been proposed for closure? This is just being done because you might lose it, in other words.
I suspect the community are more galvanised. 5 years ago, there was a similar consultation where there was suggestion of closure at that particular point. It didn't happen at that stage. It was found that it wasn't appropriate for whatever reason, and I think that was a failed opportunity. And I think the community perhaps assumed incorrectly, and unless you understand local government finance and other such things, perhaps that it will always be there, because it's always been there. It's been there for donkey's years. It will always be there. It'll always be somebody else's job to provide it, whether that's the city council, the town council, whoever it might be. It's somebody else's job to provide it. I think people perhaps are more aware, and I think the pandemic has perhaps helped them focus their minds on the fact that only through that collective effort, only through community engagement, the community taking on some of that responsibility, are things going to survive. And I think they've grasped that point, and it's a very difficult point to actually grasp, because the community's always had it's always been there. Somebody else has always run it. They've never had to do anything more about it. I think at this stage, it really is, last chance saloon. If the community don't engage at this particular point, this will close, and I think that will be regrettable from their particular point of view. And I think perhaps for the first time, I think they genuinely understand the dilemma that the city council's in terms of its finance and the challenges that it faces.
You want to come back, Councillor Blackburn?
Yes, please. Can you tell me then, Councillor Finnegan, if you believe that there is groups or people in your community centre now that would take it on, that, do you think there's a chance? Is there some people out there? Is it a decent proposition?
We've got 2 dance groups. Both of them are well organised and well focused, and I think they'd be devastated if this community asset is withdrawn. So there are people in there that we know are doers who are able to help and support and raise funds on all those other issues. The youth service, it goes without saying, if the youth service goes at this particular point, they have no place locally to deal with the challenges that they face, and they're doing an excellent job. The youth service do an excellent job in Morley. So they bring something to the pot, and they tend to have ideas and proposals, and young people who can represent their views as well as part and parcel of that issue. The disabled group that actually uses it, yeah, I think we've got people there who are well motivated, who want to get involved. Talking to the Silver Surfers group, Guy, who has suggested that already, is very active in other community groups. He's part and parcel of the Morley Literature Festival, is the treasurer as it happens, is the right man for the job at that particular point. Is well focused and well motivated. The Mums and Tots group basically said they try to engage at that central bookings level, and that failed miserably. Now, I'm not quite sure why, whether it was because it's impenetrable or the costings or whatever. So yeah, there are other groups in there. We've got a town council that's pretty active. We have local town councillors who are actually out there working Lewisham at this particular point, planting up, improving a memorial down there, already engaging with the community down there in terms of bins and dog fouling and other such issues. So yeah, I think there is the embryonics of a group that will not only look to look at the centre, but also look at improving the park. There's quite a lot of work that needs to be done down at the park. People remember the Sarah Harper Memorial. That's in Lewisham Park at this particular point. There's already a group that's working on improving that and bringing a mosaic and other such things to it. So yeah, I think there is the opportunity. There is a galvanised group that are prepared to take that extra step and take the responsibility that they need to take to make sure that we have a sustainable plan for the centre.
Oh, well, thank you for that. That's decent. That's decent to know, as someone who lives and represents a ward that has 3 community centres, and they are run by the community. They have never been run by the council. So it's there. It proves it can be done.
We've got Stanhope. I mean, I agree with the entire Council of Blackburn. We have Stanhope and Drigg. We're good examples of the community running it, and they run it better than we can run it, to be truthful. The community tends to, for all sorts of reasons, do a better job than we can do remotely, if you like. Stanhope's been an absolute success story. That went through an asset transfer in the local community. Drigg's just got there at this particular point. If you look at the refurb and the work that they've done, it's absolutely brilliant. Much better than anything that we could deliver. So I agree with you entirely on that one.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We lost the chair.
Yeah, I think we may have lost the chair.
I think we have. Yeah, there's a couple of people just dropped out. Would members like to nominate another colleague to continue with chairing, or would you like me to see if I can get Councillor Anderson back in first?
Councillor Graham usually takes
I'm
over.
going to say Councillor Graham usually picks it up.
Yeah. So.
Oh, Councillor Anderson's just come back on.
Oh, what a shame.
I dropped out too,
Pauline.
Stand down, Pauline.
Where is it?
Was I the only one that got thrown out there, was I?
Yes, you were.
So have I missed anything interesting?
You missed a treat, Barry. You missed a treat,
Yeah.
honestly.
Right.
You nearly missed Councillor Graham chairing it, Barry. So
Sorry.
Thank you, Barry.
That's all right. That's all right. Right. Now, Anne, are you finished? Sorry, I didn't get a chance to hear the end. Yes, she is. Right. So,
I am, and it's a shame you missed that, Councillor Anderson, because Councillor Finnegan was saying the groups that he had that he thought would take it over.
Well, I got that. I was listening to that part. So, all right. So I've got Councillor Bentley, Councillor Harland, and then Councillor Gabriel.
thank you, Chair. My phone always goes off when I'm about to speak. So that's another £5 for the Lord Mayor's Fund.
I was going to say there's a relationship between me and the Lord Mayor. We're trying to raise as much money as we can.
Yes. Well, I've already overpaid my last fine, so I'm in credit, I think, with the Lord Mayor.
Don't be using your son as an excuse to get out of a meeting, Jonathan, as you did last time.
I don't know who that was. Sorry to come back for a second bite, but you didn't actually ask me to after I asked my first question. I did have a couple of others, if you don't mind, Chair. Some of which have been answered. I was going to ask about the money, because if we're only talking about £7,000, I was going to ask Councillor Finnegan whether ward members or ward-based initiative or something could bridge that gap, so that he could move forward with his proposals or his plan that would have no cost at all to the council. And Trish asked that question, and we got that answered by Councillor Finnegan. The other point was, I think we may be getting a bit hung up about consultation. So if I could just get clarification from Councillor Finnegan on this. If the executive committee were minded to change its decision on this and remove Lewisham from the plan, could Councillor Finnegan confirm then that you would go forward with trying to get an alternative, and then that alternative, as well as the council's proposal to close, if it still wanted to, would then be put forward for consultation? So we're not stopping the consultation, we're just delaying it for a year so that the community can see what the alternatives are before they make a decision. And secondly, that's the first part of the question. The second part of the question is, again, I'm surprised we've got to this stage, because I had an identical situation almost in my ward, in Meanwood, which is probably the most deprived part of my ward, where we had a community centre which was not performing very well, didn't attract many groups. It was, it was on its way out in a way. But the community team helped us find somebody to run that, and it then got taken on, I think, by its Leeds Space. Is it Leeds Spaces from memory? The third sector organisation, and now it's a thriving community centre. In fact, they've just expanded it to take on a nursery school, and it's turned it round. But that was the council itself coming forward to us through Shahid and his team, saying, how can we make this community centre viable? So is no one approached you, Councillor Finnegan, on that basis?
The first question, I think I agree with you entirely, but I got a bit way later with it at this particular. The second question is at this stage, no, nobody's come forward and say, well, let's explore this at this particular point. And in officers' defence, they will, I suspect, argue at this particular point. We're going out to consultation, or we're trying to get it through exec board, all those other issues at this stage. It would have been helpful if this discussion could have been had before it appeared in an executive board report, because all that does is set concerns running at this particular stage. If we had that discussion, if it had gone through community committee, gone through the community centre subgroup, then we could at least had that discussion. We could have been put on notice even. Right, okay, at this particular point, we're thinking of closing it. What are you going to do about it? And it giving us an opportunity. At this stage, first thing that we see is the service review report, and it's here in front of me, and it's unclear. If I'm being fair, it is at least unclear, because it talks about the closure of the community centre along with Alison Bywater and all the rest of it. It's not entirely clear. It's not implicitly clear what we're thinking. We're thinking about doing this. And again, the other side of the coin is, once it's on a list, it's a challenge to get the community to accept that you can remove it from that particular list, that it's not a foregone conclusion. We've all been here, we've all been through, these proposals are in there, and at the point where you try and get the community involved or go out to consult them, their view is, well, what's the point? It's already a foregone conclusion. The council's going to close it anyway, so what's the bloody point? And that's what I'm keen on avoiding. I'm keen on looking at alternatives. I think it's got a sustainable future. It's a decent centre. People know it. It's a decent centre at this particular point. Community needs to get galvanised. The community needs to also be put on notice that they need to be part of the solution, and they can't expect someone else to do it all for them. And I think that's the point that we're at this particular point. We want a bit of breathing space so that the community can see that time's ticking. The time's ticking, and unless we and they get their act together, then there may be an inevitable conclusion to this. I think that's where I place it at this point.
Councillor Bentley, do you want to come back in again?
No, that's fine. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right, I've got Councillor Harland and then Councillor Gabriel.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of comments, really, not questions. Firstly, I'd like to say that the youth service do a marvellous job across the city, not just in Morley. And And
I couldn't comment. I know they do an excellent job in, but I don't know. I'm sure they do in your patch, but I can only speak to.
They do indeed, and are based in the one in Alton Bywater. That's not my phone; it's my husband's, by the way. This is mine. I'll just go switch that off. Hang on.
You can tell we're live, can't you?
Absolutely. Anybody know a joke or something? We can keep ticking over while she gets back.
Sorry about that. Just a cautionary tale, really. I've been a recent adoptee to the directors of such a venue in Alton Bywater as well. A beautiful old school that has a nursery attached to it, a wonderful space. We've used it for community committees a few times. This unprecedented pandemic has nearly wiped us out, and the people are really enthusiastic to get involved in the first instance, but this has put many people off of becoming involved in such things. So just a cautionary tale, that's all, because it's nearly wiped us out in Alton Bywater.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Gabriel, then Councillor Graham.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's been an interesting debate. Robert, am I clear understanding that it was on a list 5 years ago and that you've had 5 years notice that this community centre hasn't been performing as well as it could have, and it must have been taken off the list because it's still running? So why now do you think, after 5 years of inactivity, that the community is going to get up and grasp it by the nettle, and that you're asking for yet another year, so that you'll have been on 6 years' notice that this is closing? And from what I can gather from what you're telling us, you have 5 groups that use it now and maybe another 2 that are interested in it in the future. I don't know how it's going to be cost effective to be self-sustained if it's got that few members when it's been on notice of closing.
Okay, let's try and deal with that one. I think at this particular point, I think 5 years ago, I think people's assumptions were things would get better, things would improve, government finance would improve, we'd be in a stronger position at this particular point, the economy's thriving, we'd be in a situation where we wouldn't need to revisit. And as much as anything else, I put my hand up, should have done better, should have worked harder at this particular point, but as ever with these things, when that imminent challenge is removed, you've always got a million other challenges that you stand up and try and deal with at that particular point, whatever that might actually be. But it's important perhaps to focus on, we're talking £13,000 here at this particular stage, and we've got £4,000 is coming from 4 groups. So if I could double that, I'm up to 8,000. What's that? The shortfall at that particular point is £5,000. Now, if I can't get community committee or my ward colleagues or the town council interested in covering that and providing that help and support, so I need to do twice as well. At this point, I'm told 13.5 hours gives me £4,000. If I can double that up to 26 hours over a particular week, so what we're looking at, possibly just over 5 hours a day in some shape, way or form, then I can double that income. That's £8,000. I have to find 5,000 from other sources, and I'm sure that's a fairly low target. That's a fairly low target for me to try and hit. Now, if that's the case, I'm reasonably confident that I can find whatever subsidy I need to find over 2 or 3 years, possibly, for it to build to be a thriving community centre. Now, I would take the fine example of Stanhope. Stanhope's run by a local community centre at this particular point, was due to close way back when, taken over by a community centre. It's thriving at this particular point. It does great stuff, from kiddies football through to Derby and Joan to a church user. Every man and his dog uses it at this particular point. Now, I don't believe the people in Cherwell are any less or better motivated than the people in Lewisham, and to suggest in any shape, way, or form that they can't pull off the same result that folks in Cherwell do would, I think, be insensitive. I think they can do at this particular point. They are put on notice. We are putting them on notice at this particular stage. Use it or lose it. That's pretty much it. It's been the same with post offices over the years. It's been the same with lots of other facilities over the years. If they don't use it, then they ultimately lose it. But I think there are real opportunities, and the numbers we're talking about are really small. Ultimately, are we really saying that this council is likely to go bankrupt and we can't support the elderly, the young, the disabled, the most deprived community in Morley to a tune of £13,000, wherever that comes from, whether it comes from community committee or ward members or the town council or a combination of those factors? Can we not give them at least a bit of hope that if they roll up their sleeves, they can achieve great things? They can achieve the same as a community in Stanhope. They can achieve the same as a community in Driglington. I think that will be my position on it.
Okay, do you want to come back in again, Councillor Gabriel?
I'm afraid I was kicked out for half of that conversation, but I think from what I can gather from the bit I was at the end and the bit at the beginning, is what Councillor Finnegan's been saying all the way through. Just give us another chance and I can get the groups together. Is that my understanding, Robert?
I don't think we're asking for another chance. We're asking for a first chance, a primary chance at this particular point. So, yes, give us the opportunity at this particular point. And at that point, your colleagues and everybody else can blame me if it fails. There you go. What a great deal you're being offered at that point.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Graham?
Thank you, Chair. Can I ask, is there anywhere where it actually says that this community centre is going to be closed? I've received that. Or can I finish it, Councillor Finnegan?
Oh, yeah, surely.
You keep going on about this community centre that's there and what could be done with it, what couldn't be done. It's not an area that I'm 100% up to speed with everything that's going on there, but interesting what Councillor Gabriel says about the past 5 years. And yourself, you keep saying what could be there, who could be using it, why are they not already using it? But my main question is, because if it's not on the list definitely to be closed, why are you getting people wound up that it is? Or are you wanting to say when it isn't closed, oh, we saved it? So it's, I think really I'd like to know where can you show me that it says it's going to be closed? Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Chair, the Best Council meeting, our Financial Challenge Service Review Report says, members are requested to consider the proposal to implement the efficiency savings identified in this report, including the closure of Lewisham Community Centre, Morley South. It goes on to Allerton Bywater and others. So it says that in the service review report. Might be badly put. It might be suggesting it goes out to consultation. That's what it says at that particular point. Now, if we can deal with what puts off groups at this particular point, using community centres. Anybody? Well, why they haven't taken up the golden opportunity? Why they've taken up the golden opportunity? Anybody who's tried to book anything through central bookings will know that it is an absolute and utter challenge, and that people are put off because it is impenetrable. On top of that, they will also say that the charging policy is as such that they can't actually afford. And taking it, this is the most deprived community in the Morley area, we can understand and appreciate why they can't afford those charges that are presently levied on them if they do try and use the Lewisham Community Centre. So I think at this particular point, I think they're too poor to use it, if I'm being honest, Councillor Graham. And while ever we continue with the charging policy that's in there, they're going to continue to be too poor to be able to use it. And I think it's regrettable that Leeds City Council has a charging policy that is not accessible to those who are on some of the lowest incomes in our community. I'm sure you'd agree.
Thank you. I don't think I'd be very, say, using the word poor to describe people who may be in a lower circumstance. So I would support you then trying to get the community to take over the community centre. It's happened in lots of areas across the city, but I think that it needs, and what you've said, it is put forward. It does not say we are closing, and that is what we're hoping. We don't want to close anywhere, do we? But if you've got the support of your community, which I don't think it seems you have, does it? Okay, thank you, Chair.
Yeah, Councillor Reagan.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a bit puzzled as to if it's down for a consultation period. What is that length of consultation period? And is that not the same as what you're requesting, Councillor Finnegan, in having to take off a list that isn't possibly there, and to consult with the communities to find out what they want, how they're going to do it? So I'd want to know what that consultation period is, and that to me is the same as what you're asking for a reprieve on a year.
I'm quite comfortable, Councillor Reagan, if officers are going to confirm today that the consultation will take place over the next year, in which case we can draw up a plan at that particular point. If somebody can give me that reassurance, we'll all go home and have an early lunch. That's great. If that's what is being offered at this particular point, the worry that I have is that it's going to be a consultation that needs to be concluded before we get to the February budget meeting at this particular point, and that this savings is already lodged in there. Now, to do a consultation when we're in tier 3 is a struggle. And if I have December and January at this particular point, so you've got Christmas and all the associations with that, and then it's going to be concluded for the budget statement that we will all be debating, discussing in February, then that's slightly different. I'd like it off that particular list. Now, if somebody's going to say, "Look, what, Councillor Finnegan, we are not going to close it before 2022. We will have that length of consultation at that particular point. We'll have another look at it in 2022. Fine. I'll leave you all at this particular point with that confirmation, and I'll comfortably go away and do whatever I can do to conclude that consultation with a sustainable plan." But that is not what I am being told, and maybe some officer can assure me that it will remain open until 2022, in which case, fine, let's crack on. Let's crack on with a plan. My worry is this is lined up as a budget saving for 2021, and we make that decision in February. And that sounds to me like a truncated consultation, which, to be honest, my community will just see as bogus, that you're not interested. 2 months, and you're going to close it anyway, so why get involved? So if I can have that assurance, that's great. I won't waste anybody else's time. If it's not going to close until 2022, somebody can give me that assurance, then we'll all end up having an early lunch. I hope that satisfies people.
On that point, I will now draw Councillor Finnegan's contribution at this stage to a conclusion. And I want to bring in the executive member, Councillor Cooper, and also the officers that have been brought along today. So, Councillor Cooper, what would you like to say at this point before calling on some of the officers to clarify some of the issues that have been raised?
If I can ask that Shahid leads from Leeds City Council officer point of view, and can I comment after Shahid's made done his report, please, Harry? Thanks.
Yeah, all right. Shahid, would you like to respond, please?
Yeah, thanks, councillors. To be honest, I think some of the debate that members have had has kind of answered some of the questions that Councillor Finnegan and others were raising. So I'll only add value to what's already going on rather than repeat that. First of all, I would say that what Councillor Finnegan was describing as consultation processes are very much part of the consultation process that officers would seek to engage. So community committees, the community committee, the subgroup that looks after community centres, local groups, any consultation mechanism that local members may set up, including ward members themselves as well, because this is in the outer south community committee area in Morley South. I would also say that my team's got a really strong record in consultation and a really good strong record in asset transfer. Councillor Bentley gave a great example of one where we had quite a tight timeline, Councillor Bentley, in terms of the costs of that particular building and had to move fairly quickly. We also know what good looks like, so we can very quickly establish prior to Budget Council in February about whether this would fly as a proposal to do a local community asset transfer. So, for example, if Councillor Finnegan was keen on the Town Council playing a part in that, maybe doing the asset transfer themselves, we'd be more than happy to have a very quick conversation about the viability of that. But we do have a very good track record of being able to assess the viability of those kinds of proposals fairly quickly, and certainly could be able to do that well before the February timeline for Budget Council. I won't comment on usage and costs because I know San and Richard are on the line and you may wish to bring that in, but I would just clarify or just crystallise again for members that the issue here is that there is a budget challenge for the organisation, and this is part of the response to the overall response for that budget challenge that the council faces. So there's a budget imperative, and I am mindful I wasn't in the box seat back in 2014-15 when the initial discussions were taking place about this centre and its position at that time when it was challenged. But the challenge then was, what do we then do about that? And we had plenty of time between 2015 and 2020 to secure a more sustainable proposition, and usage is actually plateaued, if not decreased, in that time. So I just want to make those remarks, Councillor Anderson, in response to a few of the points that potentially just needed expanding on. I don't know if you want to bring in either San on usage or Richard on costs.
I'm quite happy if Councillor Cooper is willing to wait to get those other officers come in. So yeah, so if Mr. Jackson could go first, and then if Sarn can then follow on.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Councillor Finnegan is quite right. I mean, many years ago, there was a full-time caretaker attached to the site when it was used more widely. But over the last few years, we've done lots and lots of work on reducing the level of inputs needed, because we needed to try and do our best to maintain that all these community centres across the city are sustainable and viable. So we looked at different models and how we can do things and how we can work smarter and get more people and more groups onto key holders and things like that, and how we can reduce the resources and the costs. So the figures in the report are based on 1920, and we did have some level of resource in there caretaking. I agree that it could be hidden and some people might not see it, but there are some statutory things that we need to do, and that we need to discharge our statutory duties around health and safety checks, around fire safety checks, around the grounds, keeping the centre clean and tidy and doing any minor repairs. So there has been some resource around that for 1920, and that's what's in that report. Now, we've done lots and lots of work with San and Shahid's team over the last couple of years, I say, around sort of ways to reduce those costs. And Councillor Finnegan is quite right that the levels of staffing that we've been input into the centre have been declining as part of a plan to reduce those costs. So the caretaking cost for 2021 we would predict would be £11,195. Now, those costs are to do a lot of the statutory stuff, like say the fire safety checks, testing the fire alarm, all those other things that somebody would need to do. And because we don't have a resident caretaker in there anymore, then we have to have a cleaning service to clean up after the letting. So there's a cost of about £5,000 there. So the 22,000 that's covered under those caretaking costs would be replaced for 2021 as part of our efficiency drive by a cost of 16,600, and that would either that work would have to be covered somehow, or that cost would have to be covered if we were to continue to run that centre. There is already a water meter fitted at the centre, and Councillor Finnegan is quite right that the £4,000 that's down for water is very high. As part of the action plan to reduce the cost of these centres across the city, we're doing a huge piece of work around what the utility costs are for these centres and making sure that it's not just actuals, not just estimates that we're using actuals, and there is an issue with that level of spend on the water at Lewisham Park, which my team are looking at, and it is an overinflated figure at £4,000. There should potentially be some running costs there. But obviously there is some issues around the business rates that will still need to be paid as well. So there would be some significant running costs, but they would be lower than what was in the report and spent in 1920, because we are conscious that we all want to try and give these centres the best chance they can and make them as viable as they possibly can.
Okay, Yep. Okay, Sam, do you want to add anything to what's just been said?
Just a little bit about the usage figures, really. I mean, at the moment, or up to the prior to lockdown, the average regular weekly hours was 13.5 hours. When the building was under review in 2014-15, it was 20.5 hours per week, and it was still at that point seen in scope as one of 10 buildings that were being looked at what the future would be at that point. So the usage has actually gone down in that period, and that's why it's sort of become in scope again for the current review, and that's it really.
Okay, thank you. Right, Michael, from the report side of things, is there anything that you want to clarify as a result of comments made by Councillor Finnegan, or anything else you would like to add?
Thank you, Chair. From the report side of things, yeah, I mean, Councillor Finnegan has quite rightly looked at the service review document itself, but the covering November Executive Board reports, it does make it clear in the recommendations that the service review proposals are for consultation, and the decision itself will be made following the consultation period. Other things to note are really just to pick up on the comments that Richard has just made in terms of the costings. So if Morley Town Council was to take it over, there would be other costs other than the ones that were previously stated. So it is a bit more than the figures that were quoted earlier. So there's the 13k for the running costs, there's the 16k that Richard has just talked about on the staffing side of things. Business rates is about 4k, but then you can knock off the income together with additional income that might be generated. So still probably looking at a cost of probably towards 30k still to be picked up.
Okay, thank you. Right, Councillor Cooper, do you want to summarise everything? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I know, apologise if I suddenly freeze on the screen because the connection's not great today for any of us, I'm afraid, is it? So yeah, just a few points, really, Chair. And I have to say that Councillor Finnegan, makes some really relevant points about the community in Morley that could potentially use that centre. And I'm really pleased to hear that he's rallying a charge in that area to try and ensure that they keep that community centre, and indeed him offering financial support from the various bodies that he's associated with as well. I'm pleased to hear that it's not just words. Actually, it sounds like Councillor Finnegan really does intend to utilise all his resources to ensure that this community centre is saved. And I just want to make a couple of points, really. The community centre issue of trying to deal with the extra resourcing that it costs throughout the city has been an ongoing issue for us for a number of years. And indeed, the consultation on all community centres was started by my predecessor, Councillor Grewin, who's not with us today, but I'm sure he would have spoken of doing that consultation going back nearly 10 years. So we have been trying to bring down the cost of community centres so that we were able to keep them for the best use of the community. And a number of examples have been talked about today where that's been really successful. And I'm pleased that we've been able to do that along with ward members, with community committees, and with third sector organisations and other partners in the city to make sure that happens. And I appreciate that that's been done in Morley as well, Robert. So, and I have talked to Councillor Gettins a number of times about the community centres in Morley that he was dealing with at the time, and we've been able to overcome those barriers and get them used by the community and run by the community as well for the benefit of the community. You know, and the other point also that Councillor Finnegan makes about consultation being a done deal, well, I can assure you it's not a done deal. Consultation is not a done deal. And I know that many elected members on the call use consultation very politically, I have to say that it's a done deal and that that they've been out and they've saved it. I could quote, you know, in my own ward, Temple Newsham golf course, that was said that we were going to close it, and we insisted it were a genuine consultation, and the genuine consultation won out, as it did, Councillor Finnegan, for you in the past 5 years ago with this self-same centre. So I really hope that you do galvanise that support. I think the consultation period, and it's very clear, if you read the minute of the executive board, it is extremely clear that the decision is to go to consultation, not to close. So it's on consultation about the closure of these centres. So I hope that you do, you know, manage that rally, and that you do manage to bring funds to enable this centre to remain open, because Leeds City Council are facing its worst ever year in budgetary terms. We have £118 million gap to find. So I'm more than happy for any member of Scrutiny, any member of council to come to me with any suggestions of what the alternative might well be. But in the meantime, we have to take tough decisions, and we also have to go to consultation with people and residents in our communities about how we best save those that amount of money that we need to save, which is what this proposal is for, Chair.
Thank you. Right, so we'll now open it up to questions from members of the Scrutiny Board, and I will allow Councillor Finnegan to come in at the end to raise any questions that he may have. So I've got Councillor Bentley first of all, as indicated.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks Councillor Cooper and the team for responding and probably answering some of the questions I had. One thing I'm still not clear on, and it would be helpful, is although I accept that it is a genuine consultation, what sort of period are you looking for? And is it something that is that something you could discuss with Councillor Finnegan to ensure that you both have a reasonable time to make an assessment? And the other side of that question, is part of the same question really, is in terms of budget assumptions, because the exercise that and the numbers that were brought to Executive Board on the proposals for the 21-22 budget, in terms of budget assumptions, what were the assumptions about Lewisham Community Centre in terms of, if any, its closure date and its ongoing costs? Thanks, Chair.
Who would like to answer that particular question? Anybody volunteering before I pick on somebody? Shahid's volunteering.
Councillor Anderson, I just missed the first part of the question. I heard the thing about the budget assumption, was just the first part of the question. Was it about the consultation period?
Do you want to repeat it? Yeah.
I'll say it again. Thanks, Shahid. Yes. What I was asking was, we're talking about it being a genuine consultation and taking everything on board. So how much time is being allocated for the consultation, and would officers be prepared to talk with Councillor Finnegan to come up with a reasonable time that would enable you both to make sure it was a genuine?
I think he just faded out then, Councillor Bentley, but let me just, if I can just come back on the consultation period. So the consultation period actually started on the 18th of November, and clearly what we've had to do is just to wait until we've had this discussion here today. So it started back on the 18th of November and then we'll run to early February. I feel that's ample time to get an indication for where we stand in terms of the closure of this particular centre. We obviously need to get moving on it. We need to start consulting the users, think about viable options for the users. if that particular centre closes, whether there's other facilities in the area that may be viable for them, and really hear them out around that, as well as explore some of the things that Councillor Finnegan shared with us today. But as I said earlier on, we can get a fairly quick assessment as a team about how viable any particular plan might be to take this centre through, for example, a community asset transfer fairly quickly.
Okay. Councillor Bentley, do you wish to come back again?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. That prompts another question, actually, well, a follow-up, but also you didn't, Shade, you didn't cover the budget assumptions part of my first question. But if I could just follow up to the bit you said, can I take it from that then that you will, as a team, as a community team, be working to look at alternatives with Councillor Finnegan, or to assess the alternatives as you did with the as you did in my ward so helpfully with the Meanwood Community Centre?
Yeah, yes, Councillor Bentley, that would be part of the consultation process, which was part of the indication in the original service review. That's absolutely right.
And what about the budget? What about the budget assumptions?
Councillor Bentley, could you? I'm really struggling with my signal, Councillor Anderson and Councillor Bentley. Could you just repeat the last part of the assumptions for me?
Yeah, in the budget assumptions for 21-22 that were brought to Executive Board over the last couple of months, is there an assumption for the future of Lewisham Centre, in as much as there's an assumption in there that it will close or it will have some costs, whether they be ongoing costs or just costs of security if it is closed? Is that clear?
Yeah, I think so. I might need Michael's help on that, because it's probably a broader comment on the way that we've gone about developing the budget proposals more broadly. Michael?
Yeah, thank you, Shade. Yeah, the budget does assume the savings from the 1st of April, and it does assume that there will be no costs. It's part of the proposal is part of a wider package of proposals for a community centre, but it does assume the 1st of April.
You want to come back on that, Councillor Bentley?
Yeah, thanks for that. So we have a just so I'm clear, we have a consultation about its future, but we've assumed that it won't be there after the 1st of April. We've also assumed after the 1st of April, it will not have any costs, although we know that there'll be costs whether it's being used or not in terms of security, rates presumably of some sort and all those other things. So do we have any proposals, any plans for what that site is going to be used for after the 1st of April, so that it isn't incurring costs, so that we have made a valid budget assumption?
Shahid?
Yeah, we haven't got any plans, Councillor Bentley, but it might be worthwhile just bringing Richard Jackson in on how they handle the costs going forward from the 1st of April.
Richard?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, obviously the costs for staffing costs would have to be managed out, so we have to look at alternative work or alternative work for those staff. But I think it would, I'm not an expert, so I would have to take advice from colleagues from asset management, but if the building was no longer used, it'd be transferred into void, I believe. I'm not exactly sure how that process and those costs are then managed, so I wouldn't like to comment and tell you anything that's not factually correct.
Mr. Rogers has indicated.
Thank you, Chair. I think just to be clear in terms of Councillor Bentley's comment, that all proposals that have been to Executive Board thus far are just exactly that, proposals, and therefore they don't mean anything as yet, because it will be the final budget papers in February that determine what the budget is for next year. If the consultation process concludes that we should do something different, then there will be different figures in the final budget papers that we present to full council for approval.
Okay. Councillor Cooper?
Thanks, Chair, but this is what you get when you're not in the same room together, don't you? I was just raising my hand to make the point that James Rogers just made, that actually that we are trying to be really open and transparent about what we are looking at as an administration that we might have to consider for our final budget proposal, which will come in February. So I just wanted to make that clear that, you know, that so far we've talked about what the proposals are that we are actually considering. That isn't to say that that will be the final budget when it comes in February. And obviously, I'm expecting from what Councillor Finnegan said that he's going to be able to get this group together, get the finances together, and you know, enable for this to come out of those proposals. That's my hope.
Okay, thank you. Any other member wanting to ask any questions of officers before I bring Councillor Finnegan in? Okay, I'll bring Councillor Finnegan in now. Thank you. Councillor Finnegan.
Thank you. I think some of these are Mahmood, some of the Shahid, some of these are other people's. Can you confirm what actions your team have done to improve usage? That's question one. What partnership working are you offering at this particular point? Are you bringing any cash at this particular stage? Because the impression that I get is that officers are just desperate to get rid of this building one way or the other. And the February deadline. So you're assuming it's reasonable for me to go out, talk to my community, and come up with well thought out financial program between now and February. So if we take out that we're already in December at this particular stage, is that a fair assumption to actually make? And in terms of the officers, there's £22,000 a year spent on this. That's over 400 quid a week. Could the officer give me a breakdown of how that £400 is spent each and every week of the year on officer time? Doing what at this particular point? I'm slightly bemused at this particular point. And I haven't heard anything from any officer about partnership. Now, I assume Leeds City Council officers accept that they have some obligations to this community, which is the most deprived in the Morley area. And certainly the impression that I'm getting, and I'm sure somebody can correct my misconception here at this particular point, is that instead of just palming this off, they're looking for genuine partnership where the City Council is putting something into the pot in terms of revenue support, and someone else is putting some money into that particular pot. Is that a misconception? Is it fact that as far as Leeds City Council officers are concerned, I've got till Feb and they're already assuming it's closing in April? Perhaps somebody could clarify.
Shahid, are you? Yeah.
Yeah, first of all, just you know, officers, councillor, aren't desperate to close anything. We don't make decisions. It's councillors that make decisions. We've been asked to advise around all of this work, particularly in relation to community centres, and we would work as we have always done as a council in partnership with local communities, local community organisations, users, and ward members. And I'll just, you know, again go back to this is a proposal to consult, and if we can get started on that consultation process, I think we'll have a good feel by the end of January, beginning of February, about whether we've a viable alternative proposition on the table to closure.
Okay. Anybody want to cover any of the other points? Councillor Cooper?
Yeah, if I can just cover the point about the genuine consultation, and Councillor Finnegan saying that he's expected to go out and get this done now. Well, I'm afraid that wasn't what you said when you first came in the meeting, Councillor Finnegan, and asked Scrutiny to give this decision back to Executive Board and take your Lewisham Community Centre out of it. Because actually you made a really coherent argument to say why the centre should stay open. And you also really made it clear that you have the support of the community groups, of funding, and that you were getting together a partnership that would be in place very quickly so that you'd be able to overcome some of the issues that this centre is facing at the moment. So I would imagine you're already 2/3 of the way there from what you said earlier at Scrutiny, Councillor Finnegan. So yes, I do expect good things from you because you've stated that here at Scrutiny.
If I could respond, Chair, if I may.
Yes.
I did ask for a year. I was given 2 months at this particular point, and as much as I am flattered by people's views that I work significantly quicker than everybody else at that particular point, I can reassure people that that is not the case. And I'm trying to do it during a pandemic at this particular point. I have a timetable. I will, as ever, attempt to meet that particular challenge. I will attempt to convince my communities that this is an option that they need to explore as rapidly as it's possible to actually explore at this particular point. I asked for 12 months. I've been given 2. I'll do my best.
Right. I just want to just clarify some points from my understanding. Right. In terms of the costs that have been quoted today by Richard, to clarify what the costs are, have the re-clarified costs been passed up to the relevant people now so that they can make an informed decision? And have they been put in any consultation paperwork, website, social media posting, or however the council are doing it? So that's my first. I've got a whole raft of them, so we can do them one by one. So in terms of the costings, has that now been made available, the revised costings, to the decision maker? And has that now been put on any database so that anybody who's consulting can see these revised costings?
Councillor Anderson, I think the answer to that question is no, apart from internally, because we wanted to start the consultation immediately after the exec board meeting, but obviously because of the process in between, we've not had that opportunity to do that.
That's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. That's fine. So in other words, if we were to release this decision today, then that would take place. That's fine. That's as far as that one. Now, the caretaker, is there or is there not a caretaker in place at this particular building?
Richard.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. There is a level of caretaking resource, but to make the caretaking model more efficient and to try and enable to reduce costs across all the community centres across the city, then we have a team of mobile caretakers that carry out a level of work at Lewisham Park Community Centre.
That's fine.
And sorry, the revised figures that have been shared internally reflect that reduction in cost.
Right. And in respect of this is a question to you, Richard, in respect of the water meter that's been put in, when would you hope to be able to report back on any findings as to what may or may not be happening with water usage? In other words, this is what I'm getting at. Is this going to be done prior to a decision made in February, March time, or will it take you till after that time to reach conclusions?
Before we should have reasonably swiftly have an accurate figure of what should be the charge for water at Lewisham Park Community Centre, so that an informed decision can be made from that.
That's fine. That's fine. Now, we heard from Councillor Bentley the good work that was done down in Meanwood by the help of the community committee. Can someone confirm that this same level of support could be given to Councillor Finnegan between now and, let's say, before the consultation closes? Is that some commitment that can be made? Because we heard how good the work that Councillor Bentley was able to benefit from. Can someone make that commitment or not?
Yes, Councillor Anderson, I can make that commitment. We support members very helpfully on asset transfers previously, and we'll just swing that into action, and SAN would be instrumental in that conversation.
Right. Now, the other point that Councillor Finnegan made that I wanted to get clarification is he was talking about that he was on a subgroup that was discussing this. Now, I am a member of a community committee where we don't have, I think we've got 2 community centres in the whole of our community, so we don't get involved. But is this a decision? Is this decision one that is delegated to community committees, or is it just the charging that is delegated to community committees? So where's the boundary between the two? I know that we have control over charging in community committees. Is there any role that's been delegated to community committees on the future or otherwise of community centres? Somebody want to answer that?
Yeah, Councillor Anderson, it's more the kind of here and now, but inevitably there's a bleed through from the here and now to what we might want to do with the centre. So every ward member has a conversation either through community committees or through local ward meetings with members of my team, where we're discussing with those ward members what may be happening in any particular community centre for the here and now and for the future. And there's a number of ward members on the call today who've been actively involved with their visions of what the community centres in their areas might look like, and I see a number of members putting the thumbs up around that. So that is something that we would enter into on a daily basis with members, and certainly very much in ward meetings.
That's right. There's only 2 to go. One is the
just to be clear, Chair, on that, just to comment on that, the ultimate decision about the future of the community centre rests with Exec Board.
That's fine. That's fine. 2 questions left. One is, comment was made about the capacity and ability of the central booking system. Whilst that is not necessarily an issue that we need to concern ourselves about today, but are you planning to revisit the central booking system so that any other community centres that may or may not be affected in the future can at least be confident that the central booking system is fit for purpose?
I think that's part of a constant dialogue, Councillor Anderson, in terms of improvement. We recognise the limitations of any booking system, really, but we have been diligently working on that for the last 3 or 4 years in particular, including reducing, thinking about its impact in terms of overall cost reduction. But I'd welcome hearing a contribution into the discussion from San and Richard.
Yeah, I can come in on that one. We're constantly discussing with the lettings teams on how we can improve the delivery to the customer. One of the things we've been working on is trying to reduce the amount of time that it takes to make a booking, but that has to be done in line with certain documents and certification that might be needed. So if people are preparing food or if they're running physical activities, there need to be checks that are done, which does slow the system down a little bit. A new database is being implemented at the moment, which is going to make things a lot smoother from their end, and that should be up and running in the new year. So that there are things that are being looked at in terms of the central lettings system, and I know there have been issues in the past, and but they are being looked at, and we are aware of what some of the issues are.
Right, thank you. Richard, do you want to add anything or not? No, that's okay. Right, the final one is, right, so on the presumption that if we were to release this decision today, do we have an assurance that when the papers go to Exec Board in February for the final decision to be made, the outcome of this consultation will be set out in that document so that the decision makers are aware of all contributions that any local resident and Councillor Finnegan and the community committee have wanted to be made? Is my understanding correct, that that will be clearly set out in the Exec Board papers? Can somebody just give me the assurance, Shahid?
I'm really sorry, Councillor Anderson, my signal's really bad. I
Right,
didn't hear
okay,
much of that
James,
at all.
did you hear what I said?
No, you broke up just as you were starting, so I didn't hear
right,
either.
I'll start again. All I was saying was that can we, on the presumption that we are about to release this decision, can we have the assurance that when the Exec Board papers in February will contain a paragraph or 2 setting out the results of the consultation and the comments made by people like Councillor Finnegan and anyone else?
I think it would be entirely appropriate for that to happen, yes. So
that's fine. That's fine. Okay, so I'm now going to ask Councillor.
Sorry, Chair. Sorry, can I just? Oh, were you going to ask me? Sorry to.
Yeah, I was going to ask you to sum up the council's position, and then I was going to ask Councillor Finnegan to sum up his position, and then we'll move to making an actual decision ourselves.
Okay, if I can just respond to one of your last point that you made, Chair, about the Executive Board report as well, that would reflect the consultation period and Councillor Finnegan's contributions to that. I would say that it would not necessarily be there, because maybe that is not going to be as part of the Executive Board report in February. Right. If Councillor Finnegan actually does achieve his goal of saving the community centre in the way that he's proposing that he wants to do that. So yes, very, very difficult and tough choices that the administration are facing when we're looking at the gap of £118 million, I'm afraid, and sometimes those decisions are going to impact on our communities and our residents' ability to access centres such as the one that you've been hearing about today. The report also talked about 2 other centres in the that are under consultation as well. So I'm hoping that those other communities will also be galvanised maybe in the same way and come forward with alternatives around usage and proposals around funding to try and save those centres from closure. I know how important community centres are, and I can tell you that because I don't have one in my ward where it really needs one, I've got to say, in the heart of a really deprived community. And so, you know, I'd long to have one to rally to save, I've got to say, but I haven't. But I appreciate how much they are used by by communities, and especially as Councillor Finnegan mentioned it, I do remember this particular centre as well, and I have been in it, you know, many a time when I represented the area some years ago. So I understand, you know, how important they are to communities and ward members. And I really hope that through the consultation process that other funding can be brought to bear that will be able to save this particular community centre. And I hope if the others are sustainable, they can do that too. And I would say that, you know, some of the statements that have been made about officers actually have been a little bit sweeping, and I would, you know, stand by what communities team and my officers are doing on the ground, trying to ensure that the best services delivered to our ward members, to our community committees, to our community chairs, and you see that regularly through scrutiny. You know, members of the scrutiny board will know that. So I'd just like to thank them for all the work they've been doing for nearly 10 years to try and get community centres on a sustainable footing. But yes, it is a decision to go to consultation, and I hope through that consultation, solutions will come through that consultation that will save the centres.
Thank you. Councillor Finnegan, can you sum up your case, please?
Thank you, Chair. As for 12 months, I've been given 2 at this particular point, and I will use all of my capacity to look for a partnership arrangement. This is a partnership between the local community and Leeds City Council. I am not reassured that officers aren't looking for an abdication of this particular process. It seems that they're very keen on palming off this community centre, not looking at a partnership, which would mean they bring something positive in the same way that we will bring something positive to this particular arrangement. We're given until February. You already heard from the council officers that there is an assumption this centre will close in April, because that's going to be built into the budget assumptions. The reality of it is that even if it does close at this particular point, somebody's going to have to cover the costs of security and other associated costs anyway. So you're only passing the parcel to somebody else to actually deal with it. We will bring forward by February a partnership arrangement. We will be looking for Shahid and his team to release the information that I've requested twice that I haven't got at this particular point, to look at bringing something positive other than an abdication of responsibility, a genuine partnership where they're bringing some cash to the pot in the same way that we will bring some cash to the pot, and that collectively we can do something positive to save this community that is serving the most deprived community, this community centre that's serving the most deprived community across the Morley area. We need to give them hope. That responsibility falls on me, but it also falls on Leeds City Council. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Right. So on the basis that we've what we've heard today, it's now up to the board to decide whether they're going to go for option 1 or option 2. So what I'm going to do is to go through in the list in the order that I've got here, and if you can let me know whether or not you're in favour of option 1 or option 2. So starting with Councillor Bentley.
Thanks, Chair. Just for the complete avoidance of doubt, can you just state which option 1 and which option 2 is?
Option 1 is release the decision for implementation, and option 2 is refer the decision back to the decision maker to reconsider.
Option 1, Chair.
Option 1. Councillor Blackburn.
I'd go with option 1 as well, please.
Councillor Brooks.
Option 1, Chair.
Councillor Collins.
Option 1, Chair.
Councillor Dobson.
Option 2, Chair.
Councillor Gabriel.
Option 1, Chair.
Councillor Graham.
Option 1, Chair.
Cool. Councillor Harland.
Option 1, Chair.
Councillor Khan.
Option 1, Chair.
Did I ask Councillor Collins, or have I been a bit remiss?
No, you asked me, Chair. I said option 1.
You went right, fine. Councillor Reagan.
Option 1, Chair.
Councillor Renshaw.
Option 1, Chair.
And Councillor Smith.
Option 1, Chair.
Okay, right. Okay, so there we are. We are clearly in favour of option 1 in terms of releasing the decision for implementation. We have made, some of us have made a number of comments throughout the meeting as well, which will be reflected back in the minutes and recorded. And we've also had confirmation of either clarified information or help that is going to be given to Councillor Finnegan in order to meet the deadline as well. So can I just sum up by saying thank you all very much for your time and effort today. Thank you for Councillor Finnegan to airing this debate and enable the whole issue of community centres to probably be debated in terms of a constructive way forward. So thank you all very much for your time and effort, and those of you who are going to the seminar at 3 o'clock, you've got time to go and have a cup of tea and do anything and catch
Are you going to be there, Chair?
Yes.
Oh, I look forward to seeing you.
Yes. So thank you all for your time and effort. Thank you very much.